I think let's just do a quick introduction, and today I'll start with myself for once, but just to be a bit different because I'm not doing the subject suggestions, so let's just change things up a little bit while we're at it. But yeah, so I'm Misha Gerrick. I'm from South Africa. I write young adult and new adult urban and epic fantasy, and yeah, basically I have had a crazy week, so brain is a bit fried, but it should make for a fun video. All right, maybe let's just go to Maria second and then Maggie third. Okay, so Maria, please do introduce
All
yourself.
right. Hi, I'm Maria. I am in Flagstaff, Arizona. I write sci-fi fantasy, and I am currently getting really prepared for NaNoWriMo, even though I have college classes right now.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, Maggie.
All right. I'm Maggie. I'm also on the West Coast of the United States. I am a young adult fantasy fiction writer. I think that's all the details. So I'm actually presenting the topic today, which is why I'm presenting last or telling you about myself last. So what I was telling Misha and Maria was that this past week I read Read on Writing, and that's WREDE. And Patricia C. Reed she's written a lot of different books. The one that I grew up with was the Enchanted Forest Chronicles, but this book is about writing in particular, and one of the topics that she wrote about were defaults. And so I thought that'd be interesting to kind of talk about our own defaults, what we think about defaults, and mainly that idea is about what kind of writing do you immediately go to when you're writing something new or you're starting something new? What kind of point of view, how close, how distant, how do you start writing it, and what feels the most comfortable to start with? And do you actually adhere to that? Do you often stick to one, or do you try to challenge yourself and jump around? So that is the topic we're going to be talking about today.
Yay! All right, so who wants to get going? Well, gosh, you guys, not everyone at the same time. All right, let me be the good channel host here. I like the idea of defaults in the sense that I think we all have like certain likes and dislikes that we kind of go for. I try to avoid them though. Not purposefully necessarily, but I try to keep myself excited about writing. So that's actually kind of how I ended up in my new job, because I actually took a writing job about doing nonfiction stories because it was like a genre that I didn't really get into even when I was at school. So I just decided to give it a try, and that was actually how I got into it. But it was literally just because it gave me something new to do. I don't like getting into a groove with or maybe saying getting into a groove is a bad way of saying, but getting stuck in a rut, that's a better way. With what I'm writing, by going by rote in the end, because everything is the same. So I'm always looking for something that's a bit of a different concept or completely different genres even, and stuff like that. That's kind of my thing about writing. But,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I have to admit, like, yeah, I always have my defaults, and it's in every story that I'm like writing at the moment. So I guess I just like stick to the default, and then if I finish up my draft, then I can be able to actually make that change, because it is the first draft. It is the thing that I am like experimenting with. So I can be able to like just stick to it, and then like if I want to change it later, I can change it later. However, like one of the stories I'm doing like it in the form of like each chapter, or like it just bounces from different person to different person, which is completely new to me, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing half the time. It's really weird, and I'm like, yeah, I'll go with it. Might as well.
Yeah, that's fair. Especially when you're doing different persons and you have all these different perspectives, and you're like, I gotta make them each individual so they stand out, but then make sure that I don't get too confused about who's going where and what's next. Yeah.
Right. What about you, Maggie?
Well, wow, we went in a circle.
We did.
Woo!
So I found that what I tend to like to write is first person. And I write that close generally. And then fantasy fiction has always been kind of my style, but I've tried to do realistic fiction. It's just, it doesn't work because all of a sudden this fantastical element will pop up and it will no longer be realistic. So that's my problem with that. But actually, if I kind of think back on some of the writing I've done over the years, I try to do other things besides first person, but I feel most comfortable doing first person. I can slip into that one a lot easier. But I've done third person. I even did second person once. That one was weird and difficult. And I had a lot of, I think that was when I was with the critique group. So there was a lot of critiques on that. But I think it does depend on the story. So even if you have a default, you might know that, hey, this isn't the best way to tell this. So then you end up switching, which I did with one of mine. It was, I think, first person. And I was like, wait a second, that's just most comfortable to me, but the story won't be told the best way in that format. So then I switched it to third person because then I could have a sort of wider view of everything that was going on.
Yeah, that's actually also kind of the thing that I do, especially because I write so many genres and so many things. For me, it depends. Sometimes my brain just kind of, especially I kind of have two main inspirations when I'm writing. The first one is like I would have my brain would kind of like, as I'm writing or reading something else or watching something, then something in my brain would go and there would be suddenly another character in my head. And then that would be, I would build up like a story around that character. And that's kind of what happened with War of Six Crowns, but I'm not going to mention which character because that might come across as spoilery. But the thing about, and then the other thing is that what happens is I have really vivid dreams. So sometimes really, really bad, like night terrors and stuff, which would make you think that I would write horror, but no. But other times that when I dream in stories. So I have like, I think probably like 6 or 7 of them that are like stories already. And I find with those that the tendency is that the moment I start writing, I actually instinctively know already the moment I write what is the best POV. But for example, the ones like War of Six Crowns, I actually had to sit back and I actually had to, because I started only with a character and I realized it's not going to work to just have like this character, not a strong thing around it. I actually put so much into building up the world and making the world work, and also just realizing that I'm writing multiple stories at the same time. And I kind of had to go and think, no, but first person is going to be chaos in a book like this, because and that was kind of how it got around to being third person limited. But at one stage I was actually thinking about writing with a narrator, but like I didn't like it as much because I felt like it needed to get that like closeness as well. So that's where I'm a fan of third person omniscient, especially because I tend to write multi-personal, multi-character stories, and that kind of thing. Yeah, it's very difficult, and I have done this already, but it is difficult to balance having that closeness of having a first person story, but having multiple points of view. So, but that was kind of how I got around to thinking about it. But that's also when I kind of realized that, yeah, it's actually necessary to sit down before you start writing and decide, okay, why am I specifically picking this point of view? Because if it's just because it's comfortable, like you said, it might not be the nice way to do it in the end.
Right.
I just want to quickly, before we continue this conversation, just want to say a special hello and welcome to Michael. Thanks so much for joining. We really appreciate it. And then he also left us a few comments, so let me just quickly run by those. Says, if you can call it writing defaults, a few of mine are what I take an element from my own experience. At least one of the main characters is gay or LGBT. Goodness, Misha. you can read. You're capable of it. Sorry. Okay, and then usually one of the characters went through some kind of abuse. Yeah, that's actually also because I think that's another aspect of this default conversation that we could have is, do you guys default to having certain kinds of characters? Or is that where you kind of go, no? So I'm
I
interested.
mean, I don't know. Well, I mean, I guess maybe in a way, like, most of my main characters are female. I know at least one person's got to be LGBT. Um, well, and then to go back to what you were saying, Michelle, like my stories are like third person limited because that's like how I felt comfortable because it's like in like this way where it's like I'm the narrator, but I don't really know what's going on a whole lot. Kind of giving up like that sense of like mystery to both the reader and the writer. Yeah, and I also get like a lot of dreams, and sometimes they're pretty vivid depending on what they are. So like they're kind of the basis for the story, some stories depending on what it is, which helps me in a way because again I write sci-fi and fantasy, and like what were you saying, Maggie, is that you were trying to like get into like realistic fiction, which is what I'm trying to get into. But at the same time, I'm starting to realize that I'm having a default for those, even though it's new to me. So yeah, sometimes just defaults, but I think it's just because it's like has to do with like my likes, like the things that happen in them are like aligning with I like, which is really weird.
Yeah. Wow, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think definitely like even your defaults could probably change over time. It's not like this stuck thing. So you could definitely kind of then shift over there.
Yeah, I have another story that I have yet to complete. It's first draft, really.
Okay.
It's like a first person in the POV of a male, so that's going to be a little bit different from what I'm usually doing. And then my story where it's like switching off characters, it's a female character and a male character, so it's like they're just switching off from each other.
Yeah.
So it's very weird.
Yeah, but I kind of like the idea of that though. So that's like, it sounds like something that's going to be interesting to write. That was for me also just kind of going way back to the beginning of the conversation as well, where you said that you're sometimes a bit like nervous about doing something because it's not something you've done before. And then I kind of just, the thing that I learned kind of from the beginning of doing this, since I went serious about it, was that it's actually good to be a little bit afraid of your story, because, and that's good because half the time the War of Six Crowns terrifies me, but like it's very but it's just that feeling of, if it scares you a little bit, it's that ambitious. Otherwise, you kind of run the risk of just going for the safe things. And that's kind of where I think defaults can be both helpful and unhelpful, because if defaults are just like, okay, I'm just doing the thing, then it's not necessarily a good thing, because it means that you're not really pushing yourself. And if you don't push yourself, you're never really growing as an artist. And yes, I could have said growing as a writer, but writers are artists. So, but like I have to say, people just completely like don't get that anyway. But like you need to grow, and if you don't grow, it kind of, you stagnate. And if you stagnate, it's kind of a good way to stop writing altogether in the end, I think. But yeah, so I think being a little scared and always trying new things and pushing yourself and pushing your boundaries can do interesting things. But that's kind of, but at the same time, I do find that going to defaults, especially when you're rough drafting still, can actually be like a handy tool, because if you go with defaults, for example, if you don't know your full story yet and you go with the defaults of the kind of story you write, you can get to know your characters, for example. And then in your next draft, you can actually figure out what you actually should be doing with your story. But just defaulting to certain ways of telling the story actually means that you're not wasting time on nitty-gritty stuff that's actually keeping you from doing what you need to do. So there's it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, I think it's a bad thing if you do it like a person who's not aware of what they're doing, if I can put it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it's always better to be more knowledgeable about yourself and what you do. So if you can kind of like catch that, you can say, all right, well, I'm choosing to do it for now. And then I know that if it doesn't actually work, I can switch it up. So I guess kind of like you were saying, Misha.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, for me, in my own experience, if I think about some of the rough drafts I've written, is that a lot of them, especially the ones that are like based around a concept where I have like an idea, but I don't really know where it's going yet, then often what would happen is like I would just write a story. And then sometimes I like it, sometimes I don't. I actually have a few where I was like, yeah, this isn't working. And that's because I basically just started on a default and just kept going as far as I could. But usually what happens is that's almost like clearing the space in your mind, in a sense, because if you write all the bad ideas, then eventually you kind of figure out, okay, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this. So what do I want? Okay, I want that thing. And that's actually like something that I find. But I won't necessarily call them defaults, but I do have certain types of characters that do kind of not like in a formulaic sense, but for example, Endless, which is my urban fantasy story, which I don't know if anyone's ever read them because I think like 6 people have, but like that story and another of my stories, which I'm not sure if it's ever going to get published, both of them actually contain like what I call a death seeker, which isn't necessarily a suicidal person, but just like a person who, I want to say, really stuffed up in their minds, but like who is actually pushing that boundary to see how far they get, but they're actually so good at not dying that it's they're constantly frustrated in that like thing. And the reason for this is that from when I was very small, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Tombstone, the Western, but the one with Val Kilmer in it. Val Kilmer as Doc Holliday, guys, it is the most awesome thing ever. It is like, I don't know how to explain it to you guys, but like someone who is like literally, the thing about him is that if you guys are unfamiliar like with that kind of Western lore, and it's obviously history as well, but like the thing about him was he had tuberculosis at a time when that was a death sentence, and he's a gunman. So he would actually, in this movie, his point is kind of to pick gunfights because he wants to die in a gunfight, but he's such a good gunfighter that it's just not happening. And then it's not a spoiler because this is history, he dies of tuberculosis. So It's like, yeah, so that's kind of and that's something that even from where I was it's really dark. And I guess for this kid, it's actually very funny to think about it. But that's something that from a very young age has always fascinated me, is this idea that someone is like, I want to take destiny into my own hands, and I'm cheating. I'm going to face death again and again. And then it's like, gosh darn it, I failed. That kind of, it's that kind of, so I'm attracted to those kinds of characters, but it's like, but it's not in all of my books. So for example, I don't think the War of Six Crowns actually has such a character now that I'm thinking about it. Although I suppose Darian, in a sense, could be kind of considered that guy, but in a sense, he doesn't go looking for shit; it just comes his way, and he just deals with it. Yeah, but he is like kind of like, yeah, okay, where's the fight? Yeah, I'll go sort it out now. He is that guy. But yeah. Sorry, I'm going to be very rude because I have a cat who is scratching my carpet because she wants to go out. So I'm just going to run away for a quick second, but I will still be listening if anyone else wants to contribute to this conversation.
Do you want to go on? Okay. Well, Maria, it's just you and me now.
Yeah, the cat got in the way. So basically what Misha was saying was that there's always got to be like this there's in two of her stories. There's this one character. Okay. Oh, you're back. That was quick.
Yeah, it's okay. Let me just forgive my. Okay, let's do it this way around. Forgive the chaos. That is the door. Can you see
Okay.
it?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. It's like 2 meters away from me. But it's just that the cat is making such a racket that it's actually difficult for me to focus on what I'm trying to say. So it was just like, well, I have to make a call. Either I open the cat or I'm really going to lose my train of thought the whole time. And I'm like, yeah. So
Fair. Cool.
yeah.
You want to
Okay.
continue, Maria, or
So basically, what you were saying, Misha, just to like recap, or at least just summarize, is that you have like this one character that was that's kind of like its archetype was based off of something from a movie, and that appears about twice in your stories. Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, but it's not the same character, like literally the same person who appears in all my stories.
Yeah,
It's
I
just
was saying like it's the
yeah,
archetype.
just the same kind of yeah, like you're saying, an archetype. It's and
Archetype.
also, for example, like I would change up the mechanism. So, for
Mhm.
example, I actually have a western where there is this basically like Doc Holliday like character, but he's a kid, which is like yeah. Anyway, and then there's like and the other story is about basically it's actually you'd need to I'd need to explain the whole lore, so I'm not going to do that now. But basically, there's this character who actually, if you are imagine now you're a situation where you are an immortal, but you can die from from cancer and stuff like that. It's just going to take you really freaking long. But you can't really die in many other ways. So this guy is actively smoking because he's trying to give himself lung cancer. So it, like I changed things up. It's not necessarily to say like, yeah, I'm doing the same kind of guy the whole time. But it is like kind of a
the characteristics of
like,
him?
yeah, and stuff like for example, yeah, it's difficult to say, but for me, I would say my motifs are kind of like the kinds of characters and situations that interest me because that's kind of what where I'm writing from. It's the things that interest me are the things that I put into my story. It's not really I don't approach it from like, oh, is this going to win the Man Booker Prize, or from the point of view of like, will people like this? I really hope they like this, but I'm actually writing for me first and then editing for other people. So because of that, I suppose there are certain things that kind of reoccur in various forms, but
Mhm.
it's not necessarily something that I would say hopefully or not hopefully, but if there were one day to be a class about my writing that people should actively go looking for, because it's not really the intention of doing it that way. It's just I kind of default to writing things that interest me, and that's kind of I suppose that is my default, is just to say, well, yeah, even in my nonfiction, yeah, I don't do really well with stuff that's boring me. So
Yeah, that's always a good default is writing what you're interested in because then that's the one that you can dedicate like the most energy to. And then like that's how you can be able to feel like the most comfortable at that. And if you want to go into the deep end, then you can just slowly push yourself into it while having like that comfort space. Whereas if you can like just do something completely different, then you'll probably catapult you not only into the deep end, but you'll probably drown from it.
Yeah, that's a good what a metaphor.
Thank you. I just came up with this.
Yes, with good imagery. Kind of launching off of both of your topics with that idea of what you're interested in. I wanted to address Michael's comments about. So I think the last two comments that came up.
yeah, let's do the first one. There we go. So he said, my husband found out some bad news recently, and now I'm feeling the need to write a story about it. I don't want to be too personal or real for me because I'm not sure I can write it without breaking down, but I also feel this need to write it. Yeah.
So we're kind of talking about things that interest you in writing, and for Michael, it seems like like events in your life. And I think Maria, you mentioned it as well, that taking sometimes events from your life end up in your stories. But this is
I think I did, yeah.
Writing about one event. So what are your thoughts on kind of if something happens, what do you what are your defaults, I guess, for that? Do you feel comfortable addressing that?
If it was taken from my life, I'd probably make it into like something like that. Man, I gotta really think about this, but like it probably like something like a coping mechanism, like just sort it out. Like it doesn't have to be necessarily a bad thing, but like if it was based off of something like from my life, I'd probably like take it, just think about it, like figure out like, okay, what can I be able to use in it? What parts will I be comfortable talking about in my own sense?
Yeah.
And then like just try to like just lay out the groundwork of it, like just think it out. Or I might just put it into like into another story that I'm already writing.
Yeah.
But mostly I think it's just try to figure out what in that sense will make you comfortable, not just for like you as a writer, but you as a person. Because you don't want to go too far, like what Michael's saying. Like
Yeah.
I don't think I would want to write a story where it'll make me break down to tears. Like that's something I don't want to do for myself.
Yeah.
I already have not so good mental health, so I don't want to do that to myself even further.
Yeah. I think it depends definitely on what it is, and then I guess like you said, your coping mechanisms with what's going on.
Yeah.
Sometimes I guess using Michael's phrasing, but feeling like the need to write it is very important to then actually writing it. And I think, I don't know if this is the same for all of you, but stories are safe in a way, partially because unless you share it with someone else, you're the only person that sees it.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can kind of go through your experience, put out what you need to put out, and maybe be able to reflect on it once you have it. So it's almost like journaling, but then writing, if you're writing story-wise, then at the same time you could find a way to step back from it so you don't feel as overwhelmed. But
yeah,
it's
hence the reason why I get so nervous in critique class. Because I mean, the story that I gave them 2 weeks ago, that had nothing to do with my life, but that's just like that nervousness of like, oh my gosh, I'm probably gonna give them something that has like a little factor of like who I am or like something about my life. And I guess that's kind of like the reason like why my stories, now that I'm thinking about it, are usually the default of the main character is up against something very much larger than they are, something that they really can't control at first glance, but then they like overcome it, because that's usually like how I see it in my life. Because that's the default that I've been living. That's kind of like the default I project onto others.
right.
I don't think that's going to be ever like I'm going to move out of this default thing. I think that's just going to stick with me forever.
Right.
Yeah, for me, I'm kind of both ways, in the sense that I actually even it's really difficult to explain this to people, because they're always like, so which character is you? It's like, well, actually, all of them and none of them,
Right.
because they're all like, it's kind of, I kind of see my place in it almost like being God and creating something and saying, and now they're all in my image, but they're also not completely me, so therefore none of them are me. But it's kind of like that feeling. But because of that, it also means that in my situation, it's like a situation where, for me, I actually my writings are actually deeply personal in a sense, and it's very weird to explain to people how. Because I don't really know how to explain it. But it's my grandmother always has a saying that when you're writing, what you're doing is you're actually cutting open your ribcage, and then you're like opening, and that's kind of, you need to do that in order to have like a really compelling story. The problem is, obviously, then your heart is open, so the moment someone doesn't like it or doesn't respond well, then you're like, not my baby. So but the thing about it is that, so for me, for example, there are some things that are very explicitly me, um, even if I do change it up a little bit. And one of those that Maggie would know of is like in the War of Six Crowns. In the first book was the part where James drowned, or because I actually almost drowned when I was a kid. So I'm deeply, deeply, deeply terrified of deep water. So, but he's obviously, I changed his up. He's afraid of the dark, not so much the water, but the darkness of it. But but that kind of like terror that he felt at that end was like, it's very, I still feel it's probably one of the most visceral things that I've ever written, because I was like, something that as I was writing it, my hands were turning Sammy the whole time because of it, because I was actually channeling that like reaction I have being in water, that I don't feel the depth, the like the floor of. So so stuff like that, I purposefully go for it, and that's something that's sometimes difficult to explain why I do it, because I always say that for me, yes, you go for the positive sides, but a lot of my writing is actually me digging into the very darkest parts of my soul to go find things, because in the same breath, like some of the most evil characters that I have created are still of me. So it's still there. It's very it's very difficult to explain it. So for me, it's really a kind of thing where I think all writing is personal. I don't think you can actually write and let it be impersonal and have that story still be effective. Because I think there's a lot of people who are going to say, "Oh, yes, I do it all the time," and then my answer is like, "Yeah, well, okay, yeah." Anyway, so maybe let's just not go there again. But I have a thing about people doing that. But the thing about it is that, but other times, like what he was talking about, is that I sometimes wanted to write something specific because I want to vent. So the thing about it is, for me, is that the page is not judgmental. So, if I talk to people about it, then there's always this risk of they're like, well, you're not right, or you're not looking at this the right way, or I don't like the tone of voice you're using as you're right, stuff like that. And which is all good and well. I'm sure they all have fair points about this, but when you're trying to get something off your chest, the point is not actually to get that kind of feedback, it's just to actually get it out.
Mm-hmm.
So for me to just have that place of feeling safe enough to write something down and to have it out there is actually something that that I really appreciate about writing. So I hope, Michael, that you actually do just go for it, because if you really feel that urge and that need to do it, then obviously it's a good idea to do it. And yeah, but the side effect is, yes, sometimes I actually do, and that's why sometimes when I said, okay, no, I'm going to write like a journal entry, then I end up not doing it on video, because I know that I'm like going to, just going to break down and go mad and stuff like that, because I do actually sometimes write myself into tears. So not to say like, oh, she's such a good writer, she makes herself cry. It's more like she's that stuck up, but like but it's just that kind of like approach to writing about, for me, is actually that thing. For me, it's cathartic. So if I do burst into tears when I'm writing, and I do suffer from anxiety, like it is actually something I was diagnosed with, and I do sometimes think it hasn't been diagnosed, but I have sometimes gone over into depression. But I actually find that doing that thing where I'm like having that like or whatever as I'm writing a scene, or where I'm bursting into tears because I'm so afraid of the future, and I'm letting that onto a page, that kind of thing actually means that when it comes to, okay, now I need to take a breath and I need to calm down and I need to get that thing done, it actually makes it easier for me to do that. Yeah. Because the freak out has already happened in a safe and quiet corner somewhere that nobody else could see me do it. And that kind of aspect of it I find valuable. So and it's sometimes bad, because I do feel like, oh gosh, if I open up now and I actually admit it and address this kind of emotion, then I'm not going to be able to function, and that's kind of scary. But I actually find that past that point where I'm like, okay, now I'm recovering from what I've been writing, then it actually gets better. So I don't know if everyone's like that, and I'm not going to recommend particularly if someone isn't like that, but that's kind of just my point of view. So, but yeah, I'm talking a lot, sorry. This is what happens when my brain is like,
that's okay,
disconnecting from my mouth. So
I think it needed to be said. It was good.
It was good, yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so I think someone new joined us, and then Michael commented again.
Yeah, so let's see. So, hi doll, welcome. It's actually a very, very bad idea for me to actually wave. Sorry, doll. This is a habit. When I say hi to people, I wave automatically. Even incidentally, when I'm in a Skype call and the video is off, I still wave at the camera like an idiot. So this is just like a thing. But in fact, doll is legally blind, so waving at her is actually kind of not a good idea. But sorry, but now you know I've waved, and I apologize for that if that is very bad. But that's something I do. So yeah. Okay, stopping my mouth again before it runs away. And then let's see. And doll says relatable. So I'm glad to know I'm not the only one who waves at like off-camera screens, because every time I do it, I'm like, you freaking idiot, you know. So good to know I'm not alone. And then seeing from Michael, he says, in a story I'll be submitting for a contest, I used the fact my mother tried to teach me how to walk like a man when I was 8. I felt weird about it when it happened, and I still do. And then names and motivations, the age of the main character, even some aspects within the actual real event were changed for dramatic and literal purposes. But that's how I use my own history to make a story. Yeah, that's kind of similar to what I do as well. So it's just that kind of like I don't necessarily try to exactly capture my situation, but more in terms of just using what I have experienced and turning it around to make it relevant to a scene sometimes. But it's not something I purposefully do. It's just something that comes up.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you have like the raw events that happen to you, and then when you're writing a story, of course, like Michael said, changing things to make for the dramatic or the literal purposes, it's like you're slowly molding stuff around it to then make it into something else. But you still have the essential like groundwork came from something that was real.
Yeah. And also, you know, for me with writing, that I think is also something that it's part of the reason why venting, it's so good for venting, is that, for example, it can help you take something that doesn't have a name, like an emotion or a feeling or a, yeah, I don't know, like an essence of what's going on inside you,
Right.
and that you can't put into words for someone. And by writing it into a scene, it's not necessarily that you suddenly find the words, but you can actually show it in action. So that's something that I actually also sometimes do. Where yeah, just a random example. Like recently, there was a situation where we were talking about, not we, but like we being someone who I will not mention because I'm trying to in general stay away from politics on online platforms. So that some people were like saber rattling with like nuclear weapons, and then the same week it was kind of coming out about artificial intelligence, where two robots were talking to each other, and they had to be turned off because they created like their own language that their creators couldn't understand anymore. And then my brain was just like, no, I'm not doing this. And so, but the thing that actually ended up happening was that I ended up writing a thing about like this, about what happens if that nuclear war actually did start. And as a result, because it was like an idiot with a button that started this nuclear war, the next thing they did was to say, well, okay, humans don't get to make this decision anymore. It has to be made by AI. And then I had basically the whole story was a conversation between 3 AI robots about whether or not something should be done. And it was actually, and I still think it's actually one of my best things that I've ever written, but it's just something that's so left field that is, because obviously, because I had to create like a new language, and I had to create like this whole thing, and it has a very, very, very political bent that's very like not my thing, not my aesthetic at the moment. So it's like, I have this thing, I want to publish it, but I cannot. But it's very irritating. But that's kind of the thing that I do, is that if I have like something that's churning away at me, then I would try to like put it into something that would give it like a weird form, even if it's not at all in the way that I'm experiencing it, but it just gives it like another life to go take on its own. And then the moment it does that, it usually actually bothers me less. So that's a good thing. But yeah, that was kind of something that I kind of default to as well. So I have more like I would say like my defaults, bringing it back to, how's that for bringing it back to the subject, is like
Nice
I would say my defaults would be more in terms of like my approach. So I have a certain thing that I kind of think about when I'm writing, but it's not but I try in the content of the writing itself, I try to keep it flexible and yeah, just kind of like, because I have this thing that I don't want to become a writer who writes formulae, because I don't really, some people say, oh, formulae are good and they are effective and but for me it's just kind of like the moment I kind of revert to just filling in the blanks, it's the same story and I'm just like changing the characters' names, and then it no longer feels like it's actually what I want to do anymore. So for me it's more about I change that up, but my kind of things that I go in with are kind of certain motifs and certain things and certain approaches and ways of thinking of things always go into the stories, regardless of the genre and stuff like that. But on the positive side, this is also handy for when I'm communicating with people, because those things also make up my values. So it's kind of like bonus. Yeah, and just random, I just got a comment from Doll saying, if I were you, I'd publish that, no shame. Yeah. Maybe one day. I'm kind of the thing. I've actually said I will publish it. Like I was going to publish it on my Patreon account, but I keep holding back because it's so freaking weird that I'm like, it's like completely. It's a completely like experimental thing. So I'm just worried that the people who are like fans of like my epic fantasy with like this highly detailed and very rich writing, and then I'm going to confront them with this like very sparse, very like cold and clinical and dark, and it's dark, a dark story, and then it's just that kind of response of what the hell, that kind of thing is just so at this moment I'm like, this is what's holding me back, because that feeling is still something that I'm not quite sure I'm ready for. But maybe one day I'll do like a random set of anthologies and post it, but I don't know, I haven't decided. But yeah.
I mean, your story kind of sounds like Octavia Butler, I believe that's her name. I think it was just Octavia Butler, who wrote some pretty wacky sci-fi stories. I have yet to actually read them, but I know someone who is, and she's basically like, this is wow and all stuff. I'm like, okay. If you want to know how bad, if you want to know, I don't want to say how bad it is because she's awesome. If you want to know how odd it gets, you might as well just want to go look her up on like Wikipedia. I swear to you, it's a wild ride of like just getting an idea of what kind of like sci-fi she wrote, and it's pretty cool. I find like her books at the library, and I have yet to actually get like the first of any of her series because they're always gone. You know how books are at libraries. Yeah. But at the same time, like if you just publish that, like yeah, I get it, that like if that your readers are into rich storytelling with urban fantasy, but if you like if you publish this short story, then they could get like a whole other side of you. They could be like, okay, this is you as one person, now we could see you as another person. So like that's kind of the reason why I kind of want to like switch up like my genres and like my storytelling, so then they can get like a whole idea of who I am as a person. Like they don't want to know me as like just one person. They can get to me as like 20, as like who I am in like different subjects or like different genres. Like that's just it. Yeah.
It's nice when you can surprise people.
Mm-hmm.
I know that like with some of my writing, I wrote differently when I wrote for school assignments, like writing classes. Actually, that was more realistic, and then like just my own writing is more fantasy. And so then, like, when I had those two worlds collide, I was like, wait a second, this is your writing? You know, that seems like totally different. I never thought that you were actually a fantasy person. I don't know, everyone thinks I'm so serious, so then they think that I write like a lot of serious stuff. So when I had like class like that, they thought that all of my writing was going to be serious literature.
Yeah, it's also, you know, for me, but I would definitely look her up because she seems interesting. Seems like an interesting like person to read.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So just like as a quick thing, just Doll also left like when she said that's the thing, I write dark sci-fi when I mentioned that it's dark. And then she also says, yes, that's Octavia Butter. And then she says Butler are typos. So there we go, Octavia Butter. So I will go look her up. But yeah, it's definitely like that's actually you actually gave me like something to think about, because I kind of started going with maybe I should just start branding myself, because like Maggie, even if I write like the story, I'm actually thinking with like the Western I wrote about how I can actually change it into something speculative fiction. Because yeah, when I started writing that story, I was like 13 and I didn't quite realize the amount of whitewashing that went into Westerns as a genre and as like historical, like, so as I grew up, I'm like, I love this story, I love these characters, and I love the concept, but for damn, I cannot say that I'm like, because for me it's important to say that and I don't really say it explicitly, but I hope that people realize, like through my platform and through talking to people and the things I talk about, that I am actually really an inclusive kind of person, in terms of not like being PC necessarily, but just literally saying like, I love hearing different perspectives and I love hearing from different people, and I love and but that kind of thing then immediately goes against writing a thing where you kind of, because of it being a genre norm, kind of goes against that kind of grain of whitewashing. So it's like, you know, that kind of thing was where I'm like, well, I feel like this book might never end up being published now, because I spent so many years. It's actually my oldest book. It's the first thing that I started writing when I decided to go into a novel, and now it's kind of like, yeah, I can't really see how I'm going to, either you have to whitewash it or you have to make it about race, and that's not what I want to do either, because, you know, so it's kind of, there are certain subjects that I feel that the moment they get brought up, in order to actually justify them being in a book, you kind of need to make a thing of it in the book, and I'm like, well, it's not something I'm comfortable with. So yeah, so that's kind of, and then and so now here I am, I'm sitting there thinking like, I should think about ways to get that thing freaking published, but I think I would actually need to kind of revise it, but how? And so it's kind of that kind of story. But you know, the funny thing is, just even as I'm talking about it, my brain's like, hello, I have an idea. So like, so that's also like a thing that I love about like talking and writing and stuff, is that it actually just the act of talking actually opens up one's mind. So, but yeah, so you guys actually gave me a lot to think about. So thank you very much for that. I really appreciate that. And but it's like, yeah. But yeah, it's definitely, but the idea of actually publishing it to say, well, you guys want to get to know me on some kind of level. So here's another side of me, which is a bit more me being an angsty person, but being me completely directing the angst away from me. So, but yeah. Anyway, so let's see. Michael just dropped a comment. He said, I'm still writing a story I started when I was 15. I'm 50 now. It's gone through so many changes and iterations over the years, but it continues to be a nag in my mind. You and me both, but I'm not 50 yet. I'm 30. I'm turning 31 in December. But yeah. But I started writing when I was like, yeah, I think I was 13 or 14. But it feels so long ago. It's not like, it wasn't like for me one of those where I was like, today I will mark this day I started writing a novel. I just, you know, sat down one day and started writing the novel. So I actually counted from like, I think 2001 and I counted from 1 January because I can't remember. I think it was a day in March, but that's when I started. But like you said, it's just, you know, it starts like an idea and you love the idea, but it's the result was so childish that it's like, yeah, well, you can't publish it, and then you kind of redo the idea, and then you're still not happy with it because it's the one thing that you just never get it to live up to expectations. The other one for me being War of Six Crowns because it constantly surprises me, but in a good way. So I'm always happy with that.
And you're gonna
But
finish that though.
yeah, that's true. I'm happy with that, and I will finish it one day. One day. Today will not be that day, but one day. But yeah, so I'm glad I can see. So Michael knows what I'm talking about. I assume you guys also have like a book like that, the one that got you started. So I don't know if you guys are still working on it or if you did finish it. I'm curious. Did you?
Let's see. That's a little bit difficult because my first the day I started actually writing was probably when I was 2, and it was more of just scribbling on like little lines and then pretending that they're words. Now for a story that like a novel that I can continue, I think I get a few. The one where it's like the male point of view and it's in first person is definitely one of them. I think I started that in like middle school, maybe late elementary school. I'm still working on that, and that is one of the options that I'm going to be doing for NaNoWriMo because I really want to see it get done. At least just the first draft done. I want to get that done because I'm very sad that it's just been at a standstill. Got like another journal over there. I think there's like another. It's also at a standstill, but I have actually no idea what's going on. And that's another NaNoWriMo one because I want to like get involved in it. But I guess I have like maybe 2 or 3 that I'm still working on.
Yeah.
And you, Maggie?
One major one that I started when I was 13 maybe, and that I did finish. And then there's a couple others that I had tried to work on that I was really passionate about, and then I just kind of lost the enthusiasm for it because partially I think because at the same time I was working on that one that I was working on since I was 13. So then trying to get that finished and actually publishable was like my main goal. And so all the other stories I kind of set to the side. And the problem was that I never picked them back up again. So after that, I just skipped anything that I had kind of been on previously and started something new. So all the stories that I'm currently working on are new and not older than at least 3 years. But
You're adorable. I'm sorry. I just have to say that.
Thanks.
No, I'm just like it's actually I'm just thinking about like where J.K. Rowling, there's like this meme where J.K. Rowling is quoted as saying she doesn't really like killing characters, and then George R.R. Martin is like, you're adorable. That's kind of where I'm coming from right now because I think
okay, that's where the maniacal laugh came from. You just started doing it. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's Misha doing now?
Yeah, no, that was
fair.
Because I think like all of my stories at the moment are at least 5 years old because of the backlog I have with finishing anything other than the War of Six Crowns. So I'm like, yeah, okay, you haven't gone, you'll get there, but no. So
yeah.
But it's like no, but there's something to be said, I think, for actually letting go, but like just like not clinging to story ideas, but my brain's just like, no, you've got to do this thing. You have to do this thing. So I have like a to-do list of something like 40 books. So it's like, yeah, fantastic.
I know exactly how it feels.
Yeah, but just counting the finished drafts, I've got like 23. So
wow.
Yeah, the thing about it is that my rough drafts are like in very bad shape. So to actually
fair.
Yeah, to work them, I need to rewrite them and stuff. And then I'm like, well, do I have the mind space to devote time to the world building and everything the way I'm supposed to make it work the way it's supposed to work when I have like a freaking world living in my head the whole time for War of Six Crowns. So that's kind of where it gets stuck. But just a quick aside. Hello, Sarah. Welcome. Thanks for joining. So, yeah. All right, but maybe on that note, we should consider doing some sprints. What do you guys think?
Yeah, it's probably a good idea.
Yes, do the whole
This is the writing part.
Yeah, this is the part where we're actually doing the writing.
Yeah, I know, right? It's like it's like a novel thought. I know, but it's okay. So I think I actually, now that I'm sitting, I'm like, gosh, I never even decided what I'm going to be working on tonight. So I'm like, oops. But I think I shall think about it in the next 10 minutes. So I'm going to do a 10-minute sprint to get us started as a warm-up, and then I'll see you guys, and then I'm going to count down. Oh, but before I do that, I'm so unorganized. Let me just open the timer, because I'm very bad about this today. Right, okay, so, it's at least already set to 10 minutes. So, okay, I'm going to count down from 5, and then I'll see you guys in 10 minutes. So, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go. And time, how did you guys do?
Let's see. 220 words.
I was editing. I don't know how many pages. I was just kind of looking, scanning through.
Nice. I got, because I'm busy thinking here. Thinking. But yeah, do you guys want to share excerpts?
Sure.
Cool.
Right.
Maria? You don't have to if you don't want to. It's just kind of
yeah. It's just that I don't know how to explain this. Should I give like a little bit of like a tidbit on what this is for?
Yeah.
Just so that you know what you're walking into.
Sure. Go for it.
In about a few weeks, I'm guessing maybe 2 or 3 weeks, I have to submit another story for critique. So I'm writing this little short story off the top of my head. Kind of like a supernatural horror-ish, realistic story. So I don't really know what I'm doing right now. But here's my little excerpt. Right. Everyone in the town did not make a sound. Of course, there were the noises of cars and walking, but no one said anything. At first glance, this was because everyone had something to attend to, and it looked like a normal town. But there was an air of fear and nervousness, like it was choking everyone.
Nice.
Oh.
Where
of fear choking people.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good description.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay. How to describe this? I think actually, if we go back like, I don't know, 8 weeks, I was reading from this story a while ago, but this is a full manuscript I've been working on this is one of the 3-year going on 4-year ones.
Aha.
And I'm trying to edit it to get it into a better shape. So right now, the story, 2 of the characters are trying to find out some information, and so we're at that point where they're just still trying to figure out, I guess, what's going on. All right. It was a boring vigil. Hadar took a nap as we lay on a rooftop across from the Rotten Heart, the perfect position to see the coming and goings of people, but the worst watch I'd ever been on. It wouldn't do to interrogate the bard in a room that loved him. We needed him alone, and that meant waiting. Endless waiting. Couples snuck off into the night, whispering salacious words to each other, drunks tired to whatever wreck they called home. When it seemed like even the tipsiest men had gone off to their graves, the bard still hadn't left. There was one other exception, Naveed. I hadn't seen the guard leave the premises either. Perhaps there was something more to be discovered. I stifled a yawn as the early quiet of morning crept over the city, while the sun still had hours before it rose. This was the time that the lamps shone the brightest. Nobody was awake at this point of the day. Well, nobody except me and that blasted bard. He didn't seem the type to stay in the Rotten Heart for the night. I rubbed my eyes, trying to clear them. The door squeaked and my heart leapt in my chest. With a small shake, I woke Hadar, rising from my couch as the bard stepped onto the street. He carried his instrument case and wore a thick cloak over his shoulders. 2 others exited with him. Those 2 other men, my mind struggled to remember in my exhaustion. But they had been the ones I'd eyed earlier, the ones who had stared when we'd been talking to Naveed. Their swords were too exquisite to be mistaken. So you finally left, Hadar said. He stretched, and together we slipped down to the street level. I guess our real adventure begins now. And then there's a little break in the scene, so that's where I'll stop.
Nice. Very nice.
Thanks.
No, it's really good. I'm really finding it interesting. Your descriptions are on point as usual. So
Hey, all that editing's paying off.
Yay.
Yeah, that's nice to hear.
Yeah, it's sounding very polished. Good.
Yeah, we're getting there. Okay.
And then just noticed that we got a few comments coming in.
Yeah,
so,
mostly from Michael.
Yeah, Michael, that's an excerpt he shared. So thanks for sharing, Michael. Much appreciated. I'll get to it now. Just a quick note. Sarah said, I figured out what I wanted from Taco Bell. That should have been more productive. That's okay. I was reading about like the concepts behind Muse albums. So that's kind of like weird, but my brain is going in a direction. So I'm kind of just like letting it go and see where it's headed. But yeah. All right. So Michael also said he edited and rewrote about 236 words, and then he shared an excerpt. So now I get to do the speed reading thing. Tears started rolling down Francis's face. The memories conjured by all this still hurt, but these tears meant more. He realized how much Andrew and Sebastian cared about him. They weren't doing this for their own amusement, for their own pleasure. They also wanted him to feel good. He wanted that too. Very badly. In order to do that, he needed to explain to them what happened on that day. Nice.
Ooh.
Setting up with some characters, and then also giving us some mystery of what happened on that day. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, it's a nice glimpse into the guy's point of view. So, or the main character, I'm saying guy, but Francis is actually a unisex name. So I'm not sure. I'm assuming it's a guy, but might not be a guy. So, but the main character, it's nice to get into that point of view. So
it's a guy because
Yeah.
how much Andrew cared about that.
Oh yeah, he realized. Yeah, so it is a guy. Just going back, it was like, oh yeah, wait, he wrote it in third person. So yeah, cool. Very, very handy to know that. So cool. All right. So shall we go into another sprint?
Yeah.
And I think I don't know. I kind of feel like I should be doing like work on book 3, but my brain's just like, are we ready to go take that on yet? No. So I might start that on Monday. But yeah, so I'll think about something. I'm thinking. Yeah, so let's get going, and then I'll call you guys again in 15 minutes. And then I'm counting down from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go. And time, how did you guys do?
A little farther down.
About 357 words.
Nice.
And
Very nice.
you read stuff or what?
Yeah, we can. You can. I'm thinking. I'm still. You guys put my brain on like a thinking track. So right now I'm kind of indulging that. So I'm feeling like there's something. It's not quite within reach yet, but I'm sitting here pondering. So
Fair.
okay. So who wants to start with excerpts?
I guess I can.
Okay. Cool.
All right. They left the house through the back door, the woman seemingly on the lookout for something. Elena followed her to a smaller house that seemed to be the apartment. It looked like a cottage with white paint starting to chip away. The flowers in the front looked like they were trying to maintain by themselves. That was something she could start with as a home project. When at the front door, the woman began to search for her keys in her pocket. In a short amount of time, Elena noticed something. A figure hanging beside the door. It almost looked like a cross between, well, a cross and a hand. It was shaped as if it were trying to stop someone. Was the one by the door of the main house? She couldn't remember.
Nice description, especially with the house and I guess the area around it.
Yeah.
I could see it. So.
Randomly came up with a name like at the beginning of this word sprint. Now I gotta go look for a better one.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think this is showing promise. So it's going in a good direction for you. Maggie?
Let's see. Give me 1 second to scroll through because I wasn't at a good break when I stopped, and I don't want to jump right into a middle of a scene.
Okay, while you're looking, I just want to share what Michael said. And also gives you a moment of time. So Michael said, Fed Kitty rewrote 126 words and spent the rest of the time rereading to figure out what point of view to use in the next few chapters, as well as where to restructure the story so that it's more chronological. Sounds like a productive session. Might not be so very, very high in word count, but it's actually that you got quite a lot done. So very nicely done, Michael.
I don't know if I have a good spot to share anything. Maybe I won't.
Okay.
Yeah.
You always share, so I shall give you a pass.
Get out of jail free.
Yeah. All right, so shall we do another 15 minutes?
Yeah, I think just enough time.
Yep, that's what I thought as well. Okay, so let's do that. Get right into the thing. Right, so I'm going to count down and then I'll see you guys in 15 minutes. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go. And time, how did you guys do?
I think 7 more pages.
Nice.
342 words.
Good job.
Mm-hmm.
You're doing well. I'm still thinking.
Okay, yeah, what were you doing? Like half of your screen was covered up by something, and I was like, huh, she must be looking at like notes or something like that.
I'm actually wait, let's just do. This is a tapestry work I'm doing with needle point. So I'm highlighting the colors that I'm looking for because again, doing that, they all look the same. So I kind of have to pick the colors and then I make blocks with them so that I can see them easily. Otherwise, I miss them. It's like something like I can't remember now. Was it 124,000 stitches? That's the size of that thing. Yeah. So it's a project that's been going on pretty much for as long as book 3 has. So yeah, but yeah. So I'm basically why I'm doing that is it's mindlessly repetitive, which allows my brain to wander. Because if I sit still and just sit here doing this the whole time, my brain's going to just go not in the directions that I want to. So it helps me both focus while also letting go and seeing where my brain is going.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm struggling. I feel like there's an idea, and it's like really probably a good idea because it's similar in like quality to what happened when I was doing when I was starting out with the War of Six Crowns. So it's kind of like something that should be a really good idea if I can just nail the freaking thing down, but I can't seem to get my but hopefully it will come to me. But I also find sometimes it's better than to just sit there and think about it and then leave it alone. Because then when I leave it alone, the next time I think about it, it will come.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just saw a note coming in from Michael. He said, got stuck on the point of views and chronology. Things are just all right, so I stopped and started on the content of my next YouTube video, tentatively titled Why I Write Gay. Interesting.
Yeah.
That is going to be an interesting subject. So
that is.
Yeah. But yeah, I think content writing totally counts as writing. I actually count when I'm doing content work, not for work for myself. I actually count it as writing because it is still a way of getting thoughts onto a page, etc., etc. So still practice even if it's not going into a book. But yeah, so good going. And yeah, all right. Any excerpts?
Let's see. I guess I could share a few paragraphs.
Cool.
Right. I do have some rules about living here, the woman spoke up. Well, rather, rules about living in this town. Elena turned to her, curious about what she was going to say. Was curious a good word for how she felt? Maybe apprehension was better. If you want to communicate with your friends and family, you need to write letters. If you want to call someone, make it short and be careful with your words. Don't use any kind of cable or satellite device. Don't stay outside for long, especially at night. And most importantly, don't talk to people outside of a building. Well, that's not strange at all. What Elena got from that was that she was barred from the rest of the world with no real source of entertainment, and she can't really talk to people without being inside. Now that she thought about it, it explained why everyone outside was so unnaturally quiet. So now we're really getting into the mystery of what's going on in this town.
Yeah. Oh gosh.
My critique group better like this.
Oh,
They're such a target audience. We are. We like it.
yeah, I hope you get some good feedback and just lots of
Yeah. This time I'm going to be a little bit more positive when I get the critique.
Mm.
I
That's
hope.
good.
Oh boy.
That's good.
Yeah.
Maggie?
Okay. Yes, I do have something for this time.
Cool.
Gosh, now we are far away from well, not too far away, but kind of from the information gathering, and now it's kind of just a down moment, the moment where everything's kind of resting before it goes back up again. So, oh, she's reading. So that's just to kind of give you a preview to why this scene opens up the way it does.
Cool.
Hours later, the words started to swim on the page, and the candle burned low. A puddle of wax pulled out in sluggish circles. Every part of me felt heavy, but I couldn't let go of the book. I'd been transported to these other worlds, far from here, more fanciful and distant. The stories worked like magic to ease away the thoughts and memories that darkened my mind. Bash re-entered the house, and another one of the swords walked out to replace him. I yawned, stretching as he came over. I set down the book, placing it cover up to save my place. It looks like you read more than just the Firefox, he said, pointing at the book. It has been a long time since I've read stories, I said, smiling tiredly. My eyelids sank lower and I wrenched them open. It's late, isn't it? He nodded. Perhaps you should switch shifts with your partner. You heard? I said, getting to my feet. I was too tired to react with more than a yawn. He laughed, covering his mouth to muffle it. I applaud your vigilance, but you really have nothing to fear from us. Other than the fact that you knocked us out and kept us in the cellar, then said we couldn't leave, I said, putting a hand on my hip. No more harm will come to you from us, he promised. He started to walk away, then paused before he reached the dining room doorway. The book will still be there in the morning. You should get some rest. I'll think about it, I said, picking the book up. He inclined his head, the sound of his boots faded away as he left. How easy it was to talk to him, like speaking with Hadar, and I couldn't help smiling from our brief conversation. He hadn't been wrong about the Firefox either. It had been an entertaining story. All right, that's where I'll cut off.
That's pretty good.
Nice.
Trying to build up the world. So there's like these mentions of literature, plays, and things that exist. And yet, the thing is, the reader doesn't know them. So it's kind of like, sometimes I feel tentative about adding something, saying like, oh, there's this story, but not actually telling the story. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's kind of like yeah, I know that kind of feeling as well from like the fantasy stuff that I've written, especially War of Six Crowns with the world building and stuff. It's like they have a sense of humor that's informed by like the cultural differences between places. So it's like you kind of I hope one day maybe if I put stuff like that in, and then one day someone will come back and they'll reread and then like yeah, okay, I got it now. Because
Yeah.
this time it made sense because I actually know what's going on between the worlds, but or between the countries. But yeah, it's kind of like that, I think, because there's stuff that you know about it and that you put in to make it more like realistic, but then it's still kind of something that creates distance from the reader because it's something that they can't really understand or be part of. So it's complicated.
Oh well.
Yeah. Just a quick read of excerpts from, because Michael also sent in an excerpt. Sebastian smiled and winked at Francis as he said, "You don't need to feel guilty. Andrew and I both know when you're ready. You'll give as much as you get." In fact, some of those exercises that Dr. Martinez suggested are to allow you to feel that you're finally giving something without feeling like you're giving too much. Cool. Is there more coming? I don't
There's a
know.
comma.
Yeah, there's a comma instead of a period, so I'm like, is there another comment coming that I just did not know yet? But if it comes in,
I tried scrolling down to see if there would be another comment, and there isn't.
Yeah, so maybe it's a typo, but yeah, That's very cool.
Or maybe
And
there is more. That's just the end of the excerpt that we received.
that is also possible. So
what a way to leave it on a cliffhanger.
yeah, that's one way to do it.
Ooh, what are we giving too much away? Let's see. Because like we could think, okay, this is just relationship-wise, giving your time to someone else or giving like yourself in a way. But it could be like, what are you actually doing?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because yeah, so yeah.
That's okay.
You're good.
Yeah, so it's interesting because it's kind of like one of these that with the excerpts that it's kind of fun is that when you get like a feeling of like what it is that's going on, but you don't really know because you don't have like the context or anything like within that moment of what's really going on. So you kind of fill in your own gaps. But I enjoy the excerpts. That's why I love asking you guys for them.
Yeah, it's always entertaining.
Yeah,
it's always fun to hear who's working on what.
Yeah.
Yeah, and also just to kind of get a feeling for progress that we're making, because it's not just that you're writing something, that it's actually something that's real because it's now on the page. So that's also nice, I think. So I don't know. I'm kind of trying to give Michael a chance here, but I don't know if his pasting is going to start working yet or if he's trying to make it work. So you can let us know in the chat if he wants to share the rest of the excerpt, if there is a rest of the excerpt. But otherwise, we can gradually, I suppose, start saying goodnight, because I promised Maggie that we wouldn't be going too far past 2 hours. So.
Well, I mean, I have to go. Y'all can stay. I just have to head out.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, so Now it's a dilemma, Maggie.
Oh, sorry.
Now you made it a thing.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay. So got something in from Mike. So let's see. Okay, he said, "I'll try anything."
The one before.
And
there was one before.
There's one.
Yeah.
I see. For some reason, it skipped right to the bottom instead of.
Oh, boy.
I just wanted to say that didn't quite make sense from the previous thing. Okay, let's try again. Or that something is being taken away from you. Are you willing to try? Francis smiled. For the both of you and for myself to finally feel normal, I'll try anything. Andrew and Sebastian both smiled and leaned in to kiss Francis. They spent quite a long while exercising that evening. For Francis and for them, it was a lot of fun. Cool. That's a cute moment.
Yeah, that's sweet.
Very nice. So, thank you for sharing, Michael. All right, so. And then Sarah also said, and this is very handy, please. She says she's got to run, but don't forget to like the video. So whoever's still watching, I would appreciate if you guys hit hit like. And if you haven't yet, to subscribe to my channel. And yeah, but I think for now, then probably the best thing will be to say goodbye.
Okay.
And so that Maggie can go. Because she wants
I need to go charge my computer. It's like on 31%.
Hey. All right. Fine. Whatever.
All
right, but have a lovely week, and I'll see you guys hopefully same time next week, 5 p.m. South African time, 11 a.m. Eastern Standard. So yeah, and have a great week, and best of luck with your writing and work and just everything. And then hopefully next week will be calmer for me. So yeah. All right.
Nice.
All right, guys.
See ya.
Bye.
Bye.